We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when a relationship ends, the sinking feeling in your stomach, the late-night thoughts racing through your mind, the bizarre mix of sadness and freedom that only a breakup can bring. It's a universal human experience, one that cuts across cultures, backgrounds, and generations. But what if I told you that some breakups aren't just about tears and late-night ice cream binges? What if the end of a relationship could involve ghost towns, legal battles over imaginary pets, or even a breakup letter written entirely in emojis? Welcome to the wild, unpredictable, and often downright strange world of American breakup stories. Today, we're diving deep into the 29 weirdest, most unexpected, and utterly unforgettable ways people have called it quits in the United States. These aren't your typical, "it's not you, it's me" scenarios. These are tales of creativity, pettiness, and sheer absurdity that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about saying goodbye. From coast to coast, Americans have taken the art of breaking up to a whole new level. Picture this, a couple so invested in their shared love of competitive pie eating that their entire relationship revolved around it. When things fell apart, the breakup wasn't just emotional, it involved a very public, very messy pie-throwing contest live on local television. Or consider the story of a man who built his partner an exact replica of the Titanic only to sink it in their backyard pool as a dramatic metaphor for their relationship's end. These stories aren't just odd, they're a testament to the lengths people will go to make a statement, seek closure, or maybe just secure their spot in breakup history. And that's exactly what we're exploring today, the moments when heartbreak meets humor, when sadness collides with sheer inventiveness, and when the end of a relationship becomes a story worth telling for years to come. As we journey through these 29 tales, you'll find yourself laughing, cringing, and maybe even feeling a little bit better about your own past breakups. Because let's face it, no matter how messy things got, chances are you didn't hire a skywriter to spell out "we're done" over your ex's workplace, or fake your own abduction to avoid having the "it's over" talk. These stories are more than just bizarre anecdotes, they're a window into the human condition, a reminder that when emotions run high, logic often takes a backseat. So settle in, get comfortable, and prepare to explore the strangest, funniest, and most unforgettable breakup stories America has to offer. By the end of this video, you might just find that your own romantic misadventures look pretty tame by comparison, and who knows, you might even pick up a few ideas for your next dramatic exit. Now, let's kick things off with a story that truly set the standard for public breakups, a tale of love, loss, and very large fonts. Our first entry takes us to the heart of Texas, where everything is bigger, including the gestures when a relationship goes south. Imagine driving down a busy highway in Houston, the sun beating down, your mind wandering, when suddenly you're confronted with a message towering over the traffic. Not an ad for a mattress sale or a personal injury lawyer, but a stark, unavoidable declaration. "Sarah, it's over. I'm keeping the dog, Mike." This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision made in a fit of rage. Renting a billboard on a major interstate requires planning, a credit card, and a certain chilling level of commitment. Mike reportedly spent nearly $2,000 to secure the prime advertising space for a full month, ensuring that not only Sarah, but also her family, her co-workers, and what felt like half the city would be personally informed of their split. The message was brutally efficient, a masterclass in conciseness that eliminated any need for an awkward conversation. It was all right there in 10-foot-tall letters for the world to see. The public reaction was, as you can imagine, immediate and intense. The billboard became a local sensation. People weren't just passively noticing it, they were pulling over to take selfies with it. It started trending on local social media channels, with thousands of Houstonians debating the audacity, the cruelty, and the sheer hilarious genius of it all. Was Mike a heartless villain or a modern-day poet of pettiness? The court of public opinion was fiercely divided. News crews even showed up to film segments about the mysterious Billboard breakup, turning a private heartache into a very public spectacle. But the real question on everyone's mind was, how did Sarah take it? According to some reports that surfaced later, she was initially and understandably mortified. The humiliation of having your personal life broadcast across the city is hard to fathom. But then something shifted. Instead of hiding in shame, Sarah reportedly decided to lean into the absurdity. She never publicly responded with a billboard of her own, but friends suggested she found a strange sense of closure in the sheer finality of it. There was no room for "can we talk?" or "let's work things out." The message was definitive, permanent, and literally set in vinyl. In a weird way, Mike's incredibly public act gave her no choice but to accept it and move on, probably with the support of countless strangers who are now on #Team Sarah. It was a breakup that truly broke the mold, proving that when you want to make sure there's no doubt things are finished, you go big or you go home. If you thought a billboard was a grand gesture for a breakup, wait until you hear about one that truly took things to new heights, literally. Our second story lifts our gaze from the highways of Texas to the wide open skies above California, where one person decided the only way to end things was with a message that would be seen for miles and vanish into thin air, just like their relationship. This is the tale of the skywriting split, an act of aerial audacity that turned a private goodbye into a public spectacle for an entire city to witness. The mastermind behind this cloud-based curtain call was a woman named Chloe, who had reached her limit with a partner notorious for avoiding difficult conversations. Fed up with being ghosted or given the runaround, she decided to ensure her final words would be utterly impossible to ignore. She contacted a local skywriting company and shelled out a staggering $1,500 for a single custom message. For that price, she got a pilot, a specialized plane, and a brief window of time to etch her feelings into the very atmosphere. The day of the breakup dawned bright and unusually clear over Los Angeles, a critical detail, as skywriting requires near-perfect conditions with minimal wind to ensure the message holds its form long enough to be read. As the plane began its maneuvers, onlookers at beaches, in parks, and stuck in traffic on the freeways looked up, expecting to see an ad for a new movie or a local casino. Instead, they were treated to a deeply personal and brutally concise declaration that slowly materialized against the blue sky. J.Ake, it's over. See, the message was short, but its impact was massive. The use of just her initial added a layer of mysterious finality, a signature on a dissolving contract written in condensed water vapor. For Jake, the moment was reportedly surreal. He was at a friend's rooftop barbecue when someone pointed up and said, "Hey, isn't that for you?" He looked up to see his name and his business broadcast across the heavens. There was no denying it, no deleting a text, no avoiding a call. His humiliation was witnessed by dozens of friends and strangers, all while he stood there holding a burger. It was a breakup delivered with the ultimate power move, absolute finality, and undeniable public proof. The aftermath was as fleeting and chaotic as the message itself. The words lingered for a few minutes before the wind slowly began to distort the letters, stretching the "over" into a blurry smear before it dissolved entirely. A perfect, unintentional metaphor for how relationships often fade rather than end cleanly. Down below, phones were out. The event was captured on video and photos instantly flooded social media, with the hashtag skywriting split trending locally by the evening. People debated the ethics, the cost, and the sheer dramatic flair of it all. Was it the ultimate power play in a breakup or a costly and cruel overstep? Regardless of the verdict, Chloe achieved her goal. She got the last word, and it was written in the one place Jake could never look away from. If you thought skywriting was a unique way to end a relationship, our next story redefines the very concept of closure, transforming a personal heartbreak into a public cultural event. This tale takes us to a small art gallery in Portland, Oregon, where one person decided their breakup wasn't just a private matter to be mourned, but a historical moment to be curated, analyzed, and put on display for all to see. The architect of this elaborate farewell was an artist named Leo, who, after a 7-year relationship ended, found himself surrounded by the physical evidence of a life that was no longer his. Rather than stuffing mementos into a box to gather dust in a closet, he saw an opportunity. He reached out to a curator friend who managed a local gallery, and together they conceived of something truly unique, a full-scale museum exhibit dedicated to the relationship itself. Leo didn't just want to get rid of the memories, he wanted to autopsy them, to understand what went wrong by treating the entire affair as a historical artifact. The exhibit, titled "We Were Here, a Retrospective," was meticulously organized. Gallery walls were lined with framed love letters, their passionate declarations now serving as cold evidence of a faded connection. Display cases held every significant gift ever exchanged: a tarnished silver locket, a first-edition book with a heartfelt inscription now rendered ironic, even a half-empty bottle of a shared cologne. Each item was accompanied by a typed museum placard, not with a description of the object, but with a caption detailing the memory it held and often a cynical footnote about the promise it failed to keep. One placard next to a ticket stub from their first concert simply read, "Object, evidence of initial compatibility. Note, the band broke up 6 months later." Important we failed to notice. The piece de resistance, however, was the centerpiece of the gallery, a life-sized silhouette of a couple painted on the wall, but with a cavernous, jagged crack splitting the two figures apart. Viewers were encouraged to write their own breakup memories on small slips of paper and stuff them into the crack, a participatory act that turned one man's heartache into a communal monument for collective grief. The opening night was a surreal mix of art gallery vernissage and awkward wake. Dozens of people showed up, including mutual friends who were both fascinated and mortified to see their own roles in the couple's history indirectly referenced in the displays. The real spectacle, however, was the arrival of Leo's unsuspecting ex-partner, who had only been told it was a new art show opening. She walked through the entire exhibit, seeing the most intimate moments of their life together presented as clinical museum pieces, her own private words and gifts put on trial for an audience of strangers. Reports from attendees described a range of emotions flashing across her face: initial confusion, dawning horror, and finally, a sort of detached, stunned resignation. The exhibit stayed up for a month, and it sparked a local conversation about the nature of art, healing, and privacy. Was this a brilliant, therapeutic act of reclaiming one's narrative, or a spectacularly petty and public violation of trust? Leo claimed the process was deeply cathartic, a way to objectify his pain and therefore overcome it. For his ex, it was likely a month of unparalleled social awkwardness, having to explain to co-workers and new acquaintances why they might have seen her personal letters on a gallery wall. It was a breakup that refused to be quiet or private, insisting instead that the end of a love story could be just as much of a spectacle as its beginning. After the very public spectacle of the museum exhibit, our fourth story offers a breakup with a different kind of cruelty, one disguised as an adventure. This is the tale of the treasure hunt termination, a meticulously planned emotional odyssey that turned a couple's most cherished memories into the very roadmap for their demise. It all began with a beautifully wrapped box left on a doorstep containing a single, tantalizing clue and a note that simply read, "Follow the path to your surprise." The recipient, a woman named Maya, was initially thrilled. Her partner, Ben, was known for his grand romantic gestures, and she believed this was the prelude to a proposal or a spectacular anniversary gift. The first clue led her to the cafe where they had their first date. There, tucked under the very table where they'd shared nervous laughs, was another envelope. This pattern continued for hours, with each clue guiding her to a different shrine of their shared history. The park bench where they first said, "I love you," the movie theater where they saw their favorite film 10 times, the hiking trail where they got caught in the rain and danced instead of seeking shelter. With each new location, Maya's excitement grew. She was retracing the entire timeline of their love, and the emotional high was intoxicating. She texted Ben updates, her messages filled with heart emojis and exclamation points, completely unaware that he was orchestrating the entire journey from his apartment, watching her progress with a chilling sense of purpose. The hunt was a masterpiece of narrative manipulation, using nostalgia as a weapon. The final clue led her to the beach where they had scattered the ashes of her beloved dog a year prior, a place of profound shared vulnerability. There, buried in the sand exactly where they had sat crying together, was not a ring box but a small, locked metal chest. Taped to the top was a key and a final note. Her hands trembling from both anticipation and exhaustion, she unlocked the chest. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was not a piece of jewelry, but a small digital audio player with a single button. She pressed it, and Ben's voice, calm and clear, filled the salty air. The recording was a breakup speech. It detailed with cold, clinical precision all the reasons their relationship had to end. He thanked her for the memories they had just revisited, but stated that they were now just that, memories, artifacts of a story that was over. The audio ended with, "I thought you deserved one last adventure together. Consider this your final treasure." The emotional whiplash was devastating. The very locations that had filled her with joy and hope just moments before were now permanently tainted, rewritten as stops on a road to rejection. The entire day, which she had experienced as a building wave of love, was revealed to be an elaborate lie, a drawn-out performance where she was the unknowing audience of one. The psychological impact was profound. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a complete recontextualization of her entire day, and by extension, many of her core memories. The places that once brought her comfort would now forever be marked as the stages for her own personal humiliation. It was a termination that demonstrated a terrifying truth. Sometimes, the most painful breakups aren't the angry ones, but the ones that are thought out with calm, creative cruelty. From the psychological warfare of a treasure hunt, we turn to a breakup that adopted the language of democracy, turning a personal decision into a mock political race where the only platform was dissolution. Our fifth story comes from a college campus in Ohio, where a student named Alex decided that a simple conversation was far too mundane for the end of his 2-year relationship. Instead, he launched what he called the "Vote Zoe Off the Island" campaign, a full-blown political satire that blurred the lines between hilarious and horrifying. The campaign kicked off with a launch event that would make any aspiring politician jealous. Alex designed and printed 100 full-color posters featuring a dramatically unflattering photo of his soon-to-be ex, Zoe, with the bold, all-caps slogan, "It's time for a change." Beneath her photo, bullet points outlined his platform, which included satirical promises like reduce emotional deficit spending and term limits on this relationship. He even had custom buttons made, which he handed out to confused students across the quad. The buttons simply read, "I voted," though no one was quite sure what the election was for yet. The centerpiece of the campaign was a dedicated website which hosted a single polling station. The site featured a countdown timer to Election Day and a lone question: should Alex and Zoe break up? With 2 radio buttons for yes or no, Alex promoted the website link on all the posters, effectively turning the entire student body into unwitting participants in his relationship's referendum. For a week, the campus was abuzz with the bizarre spectacle. Students debated the ethics of it in the cafeteria, laughed about the absurdity of the posters, and of course, thousands of them voted. The public's involvement was total. It became the main topic of conversation, a shared inside joke for everyone except the one person it was truly about. Zoe, meanwhile, was initially completely in the dark. She saw the posters but, like everyone else, assumed it was an elaborate, if slightly mean-spirited, art project or comedy bit. The reality only dawned on her when a friend showed her the website and she recognized the specific private grievances listed in the platform, cleverly disguised as political rhetoric. The satirical nature of the campaign made the pain uniquely cutting. It wasn't a heated argument or a sad confession. It was a premeditated, creative, and very public mockery of their entire relationship. Her private heartache had been turned into a public punchline for the entertainment of her peers. On election night, Alex staged his final event. He set up a podium outside the student union, and with a small crowd gathered out of morbid curiosity, he live-streamed the closing of the online poll. The results were a foregone conclusion. The yes vote had won in a landslide. Alex gave a concession speech that was also a breakup speech, thanking his constituents for their support and solemnly declaring that he would respect the will of the people. He then packed up his podium and walked away, leaving Zoe, who had been watching from a distance, to grapple with a breakup that felt less like a personal rejection and more like she had been voted off a reality show by a nation of strangers. It was a split that weaponized humor and public opinion, proving that sometimes the most painful breakups are the ones that make everyone else laugh. After the very public spectacle of a campus-wide vote, our sixth story proves that sometimes the most unforgettable messages come from the most unexpected messengers. This is the tale of the animal messenger split, a breakup that traded human confrontation for a feathered intermediary and left one person wondering if they'd just been dumped by a parrot. Our story centers on a man named David, an eccentric animal trainer who had grown weary of his relationship with his girlfriend, Emma. Paralyzed by the thought of a difficult, emotional conversation, he decided to outsource the job to his most talented pupil, a brilliantly colored African gray parrot named Cicero. David's logic was both bizarre and meticulously calculated. He believed that delivering the news through a third party, especially a non-human one, would soften the blow, making it seem more like an unavoidable fact of nature than a personal rejection. For 2 weeks, he dedicated himself to the task, transforming his living room into a rehearsal space for feathered heartbreak. The training process was a study in patience and peculiarity. Using Cicero's favorite treats, slices of mango and shelled peanuts, David would repeatedly speak the phrase he wanted the bird to learn: "It's over, fly away." He'd say the word slowly and clearly, rewarding Cicero with a treat every time he successfully mimicked the sounds. Over days, the parrot's squawky approximation gradually sharpened into a startlingly clear and crisp declaration. David even trained him to deliver the line on cue, which for Cicero was the sight of Emma's favorite yellow scarf. The stage was set for one of the most surreal breakups imaginable. The moment of truth arrived on a seemingly ordinary Saturday afternoon. Emma arrived at David's apartment for their weekly movie night, wrapping her yellow scarf around a chair as she always did. She greeted David and then, as was her habit, went to say hello to Cicero, who was perched contentedly in his cage. She chirped, "Hello, handsome," expecting the parrot's usual repertoire of whistles or a playful hello in return. Instead, the bird fixed her with a beady eye, ruffled his feathers, and in a perfect, unmistakable imitation of David's voice declared, "It's over, fly away." The confusion was absolute. Emma first burst out laughing, assuming it was a bizarre new joke David had taught the bird. She turned to him, expecting to see him laughing too, but found his face pale and solemn. He simply looked at her, then at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. The horrifying reality began to dawn on her. The parrot wasn't joking, this was the message. The man she had been dating for over a year didn't have the courage to speak to her himself. He had used a bird to do his dirty work. the initial shock gave way to a wave of anger and profound humiliation. She hadn't just been broken up with, she had been broken up with by a pet. The aftermath was as messy as you might expect. After her initial stunned silence, Emma reportedly unleashed a torrent of fury at David, not the parrot, before storming out. The story, which she later shared with friends, became the stuff of local legend. Questions swirled: was this animal cruelty, a brilliant work of performance art, or just the act of a profoundly cowardly person? For David, his plan to avoid drama had backfired spectacularly, creating a story so strange and memorable that it would forever define him. For Emma, the memory of that day was forever tangled with the image of a beautiful bird speaking words of rejection in the voice of the man she loved. It was a breakup that proved that when you try to use an animal to avoid emotional responsibility, you don't get a clean getaway. You just create a story that's impossible for anyone to forget. While some people shout their breakups from billboards or the sky, our next story demonstrates the power of a more subtle, patient, and intellectually cruel approach. This is the tale of the crossword puzzle clue, a breakup delivered not with a shout, but with a quiet, smug whisper hidden in plain sight within the pages of a major metropolitan newspaper. The mastermind was a linguistics PhD candidate named Arthur, who had spent months meticulously planning the end of his relationship with Claudia, a fiercely competitive and devoted crossword puzzler. For them, the Sunday New York Times crossword was a sacred weekly ritual. They would sit side by side in comfortable silence, the only sounds being the scratch of pencils and the occasional triumphant sigh when a particularly clever clue was solved. Arthur knew that this shared intellectual space was the perfect arena for his final act. He didn't want a messy confrontation, he wanted a checkmate. His plan required an astonishing level of commitment and a dash of nepotism. Arthur's uncle was a mid-level editor at a well-regarded regional newspaper, the Boston Globe. After weeks of pestering and leveraging family goodwill, Arthur managed to convince his uncle to slip a single, custom clue into that Sunday's crossword puzzle, promising it was an inside joke for Claudia's birthday. The puzzle was published, and that Sunday morning unfolded like any other. Claudia fetched the paper, poured 2 cups of coffee, and settled in, eager to tackle the grid. The puzzle proceeded normally until she reached 37 across. The clue read, "Reason we can't see each other anymore, 6 letters." Claudia, a seasoned solver, initially appreciated the clever misdirection. She likely assumed it was a witty clue for a word like split or breakup itself. She filled in the letters one by one, her pencil moving with confident speed. The answer, which intersected perfectly with the words she had already filled in, was IHATEU. The delayed realization was the true masterpiece of Arthur's design. It wasn't immediate. For a few seconds, she just stared at the completed grid, her brain reconciling the familiar, playful act of solving with the brutal, personal message now staring back at her. The 6 letters weren't a synonym for a breakup, they were the reason itself. The ritual they shared, the quiet companionship of the morning, had been weaponized. The puzzle was no longer a game, it was a delivery system for contempt. The sheer effort involved the manipulation of a family connection, the patience to wait for the perfect day, the knowledge that she would be the one to physically write the words of her own rejection, made it a uniquely devastating act. Arthur, who had been silently watching her from across the table, finally spoke. He reportedly said, "I see you solved it," before calmly collecting his things and leaving the apartment. He had used her own intellect and passion against her, turning a moment of personal achievement into one of profound humiliation. The story, which Claudia later shared with a close friend who then told others, spread through academic and literary circles. It was a breakup that was discussed not for its drama, but for its chilling, calculated brilliance. It was the ultimate passive-aggressive gesture, a declaration of war disguised as a puzzle, proving that the most cutting goodbyes aren't always the loudest sometimes, they're just waiting for you to pencil them in. If you thought a crossword puzzle was a clever way to deliver a message, wait until you hear about a breakup that turned the entire concept of communication into a live action game with only one way out. Our eighth story is the ultimate in immersive theater of the heart, a tale of two people trapped in a room where every solved puzzle didn't lead to a prize but to a painful truth. This is the escape room escape, a breakup so elaborately staged it would make a Hollywood producer blush. The architect of this emotional labyrinth was a woman named Sophia, a graphic designer with a flair for the dramatic and a deep-seated frustration with her partner, Mark's inability to see their relationship's problems. He was a brilliant engineer who excelled at solving logical problems but was utterly blind to emotional ones. Sophia realized that simply telling him it's over would be met with a barrage of logical counter-arguments. So she decided to speak to him in a language he understood perfectly, puzzles. She spent 2 months and a considerable chunk of her savings designing and building a fully functional custom escape room in a rented storage unit, themed entirely around the history of their relationship. The experience began like any other escape room adventure. Mark arrived thinking it was a fun date night and was immediately immersed. The first puzzles were nostalgic and sweet, requiring him to recall the date of their first kiss or the name of the restaurant where they celebrated his promotion. He breezed through them, laughing and complimenting Sophia on her creativity. But as the game progressed, the tone of the clues began to shift. A combination lock wasn't opened with a birthday, but with the date of their biggest fight. A cipher revealed not a sweet nothing, but a transcribed recording of a promise he had broken. The puzzles were holding up a mirror, and Mark was being forced to solve the very evidence of their disconnect. The final chamber was the masterpiece. To unlock the door, the literal and metaphorical exit, Mark had to solve one last puzzle. It was a complex wiring board representing their communication, with tangled cords labeled sarcasm, silence, defensiveness, and apology. The correct solution to complete the circuit and open the door was to physically unplug and remove every single cord except for one, a lone, severed wire labeled honesty. He stood there for a long time, looking at the board, the metaphorical weight of the action crashing down on him. To escape the room, he had to symbolically dismantle their entire relationship, acknowledging that true communication had been disconnected long ago. When he finally unplugged the last cord, the door clicked open. Instead of a congratulatory cheer, he found Sophia standing in the hallway, a single bag of his belongings at her feet. She simply said, "You solved it, you're free to go." The escape room wasn't a game, it was a 3-dimensional breakup letter. For Mark, the reaction was a slow-motion avalanche of realization. The hour he had spent diligently solving puzzles was an hour spent systematically proving to himself why they were wrong for each other. He couldn't even argue. He had literally pieced the evidence together with his own hands. He had been an active participant in his own dumping, and the only way out was to admit defeat. It was a goodbye that didn't just tell him it was over, it made him understand why. While some breakups play out like public spectacles or intricate puzzles, our 9th story takes a turn towards the morbidly final, trading drama for the dignified, somber tones of a death notice. This is the account of the obituary announcement, a farewell so definitive it borrowed the language of literal loss, leaving friends and family to mourn a relationship as if it were a person. The creator of this macabre masterpiece was a woman named Elena, who felt that after a decade-long relationship, a simple "we're done" wouldn't suffice. The bond had been a central part of her identity and her social circle for so long that its end felt like a true death, and she believed it deserved the appropriate rites. She contacted the obituary desk of her local newspaper, the Seattle Times, and placed a paid notice in the classified section, following the exact same format used for announcing the passing of a loved one. The notice appeared on a Sunday morning, nestled among tributes to beloved grandparents and community pillars. It began with a heavy, formal headline, "In loving memory of the relationship between Elena Shaw and Benjamin Reed." What followed was a brutally honest and oddly poignant eulogy. It detailed the relationship's birth. They met in the spring of 2010, introduced by mutual friends at a concert, its vibrant life. It enjoyed long hikes in the Cascades, terrible horror movies, and a shared dream of opening a bookstore. And its protracted illness, it was preceded in death by trust, communication, and shared goals. It even included the cause of death, complications from chronic indifference. The notice concluded with funeral arrangements stating there would be no service, as the relationship had been dying quietly for years, and asked that in lieu of flowers, well-wishers, please respect our privacy during this difficult time. The immediate fallout was a tidal wave of confusion and panic. Friends and family who routinely read the obituaries were confronted with a horrifying shock. The phrasing was so perfectly authentic that dozens of people initially believed that either Elena or Benjamin had actually died. The phone lines lit up. Grief-stricken calls poured into both of their parents' houses, with tearful relatives offering condolences for a loss they didn't fully understand. The horrifying truth only emerged after several minutes of panicked conversation. No one had died. It was just over. For Benjamin, the discovery was arguably the most shocking of all. He learned his decade-long relationship had ended not from Elena, but from his own mother, who called him sobbing, screaming, "Why didn't you tell me you were dying?" Only to have the situation devolve into an even more confusing and angry conversation once the reality was clarified. The humiliation was profound. His private life had been framed as a public tragedy, and he was forced to spend the day fielding calls from every corner of his life, not receiving condolences for his loss, but explanations for his very public dumping. The obituary's final, cruelest trick was its tone. It was written with a kind of sorrowful, dignified grace that made any angry reaction from him seem callous and out of place. How do you yell at a eulogy? In the days that followed, the announcement became a minor scandal in their social circle. Some people admired Elena's audacity and the cathartic finality of it. For her, it was the ultimate act of closure. She had literally buried the relationship and given it a proper send-off, making it impossible to backslide or reconsider. For others, it was a grotesque overstep, a violation of privacy that used the format of genuine grief for a cheap, dramatic stunt. It forced everyone who knew them to pick a side, transforming their split into a community event framed by the language of mortality. It was a breakup that didn't just end things, it declared the relationship deceased, ensuring there would be no resurrection. Moving from the somber finality of a published obituary, we find a breakup that couldn't be more different in tone, a rejection set to music and performed by a cast of dozens. This is the story of the flash mob finale, a public dissolution that traded quiet grief for a spectacular, humiliating, and impeccably choreographed spectacle in the middle of a bustling town square. The orchestrator was a man named Liam, a theater major with a flair for the dramatic and a burning desire to end his relationship in a way that would be, above all else, unforgettable. He'd grown tired of his girlfriend, Chloe, and rather than have a private conversation, he spent weeks covertly planning a performance he deemed a more fitting end to their show. He recruited 50 fellow drama students and dancers, promising them pizza and a great story, and rehearsed them in a secret location with a custom-written breakup anthem. The song, titled "It's Curtains for Us, Baby," was a peppy, upbeat pop number with devastatingly clear lyrics. The chorus went, "You used to be my leading lady, but now the show is through. Don't need a ticket for this drama, 'cause I'm officially breaking up with you." The day arrived, and the stage was set at Philadelphia's Love Park, a location Liam chose for its ironic name. Chloe believed they were going for a casual afternoon stroll. As they walked through the plaza, a single dancer suddenly broke from the crowd and began a routine. Then another joined, and another, until the entire square was filled with 50 people moving in perfect, joyous synchronization. Chloe, like the rest of the unsuspecting public, was initially delighted, pulling out her phone to record the spontaneous performance. She smiled up at Liam, who was watching her reaction with a calm intensity. The moment of horrifying realization came at the bridge of the song. The dancers parted, creating a direct pathway between Liam and Chloe. The music softened slightly, and the entire mob pointed directly at her as Liam began to sing the lead vocal himself, his voice projected for the entire park to hear. The verse was brutally specific, citing the time she forgot his birthday and her annoying habit of chewing too loudly. The performance that Chloe had been recording as a fun, random event was revealed to be a meticulously planned public shaming with her as the sole target. The smile melted from her face, replaced by a look of dawning, gut-wrenching horror as she understood that every person dancing around her was in on the joke, and she was the punchline. The crowd's reaction was a mixed bag of cheers and uncomfortable murmurs. Some spectators, too far away to hear the specific lyrics, clapped along to the catchy tune. Those closer in, however, began to understand the true nature of the performance, their expressions shifting from amusement to second-hand embarrassment and pity for the frozen, red-faced woman at the center of it all. The flash mob ended with its biggest number, the dancers forming a heart shape around the couple before dramatically throwing their hands in the air and miming an explosion, after which they all immediately dispersed into the crowd, leaving Liam and Chloe standing alone in the sudden silence. The aftermath was a special kind of social torture. As the dancers vanished, Chloe was left standing in the middle of the park, surrounded by strangers who were now staring directly at her, some still clapping awkwardly, others whispering behind their hands. Liam simply gave a slight bow, turned, and walked away, leaving her to navigate the aftermath alone. She had to push through a gauntlet of curious onlookers, some of whom asked if it was a prank for a TV show. The emotional whiplash was absolute. The high of witnessing a seemingly magical public event was instantly transformed into the low of a deeply personal and humiliating rejection. For Liam, it was the ultimate dramatic exit. For Chloe, it was a betrayal that turned a place of happy memories into a stage for her most cringe-worthy moment, a breakup she would literally never be able to forget. If you thought a flash mob was a public way to end things, our next story proves that a breakup can be delivered with a side of sweet, delicious irony. This is the tale of the edible arrangement rejection, a farewell so passive-aggressive it turned a classic gesture of affection into a weapon of mass discomfort, all wrapped up in chocolate-dipped fruit. The sender was a man named Colin, who found himself wanting to end a 6-month relationship, but was utterly averse to any form of direct confrontation. He needed a method that was final, unmistakable, and ideally allowed him to be miles away when the message was received. His solution arrived at his ex's doorstep via a uniformed delivery driver, bearing what appeared to be a gorgeous, lavish gift, a premium, get-well-soon edible arrangement. The irony of the chosen theme was surely not lost on him. The basket was a masterpiece of deceptive confectionery, overflowing with lush chocolate-dipped strawberries, pineapple daisies, and clusters of grapes, all arranged beautifully around a central message plaque, which was also made of solid milk chocolate. The recipient, a woman named Hannah, was initially thrilled and deeply confused. She hadn't been sick, and it wasn't her birthday. Assuming it was a sweet surprise, just because gift from Colin, she immediately texted him a picture with a heart-eyed emoji, thanking him for his thoughtfulness. He never replied. Eager to dive in, she plucked the juiciest-looking strawberry from the arrangement and took a bite, still oblivious to the truth hidden in plain sight. It was only after she had enjoyed a few pieces, her fingers sticky with chocolate, that she decided to break off a piece of the large central chocolate plaque, assuming it was a decorative element meant to be eaten last. As she snapped the plaque in half, she noticed something odd. The chocolate was unusually thick. Turning the two pieces over, she saw that the back of the plaque was not smooth. Instead, a message had been meticulously piped onto it in thick, white icing letters before the entire thing was enrobed in a layer of dark chocolate. The message was short, brutal, and now partially mangled by her own snacking. It read, "Sorry, we're done, enjoy the fruit." The emotional whiplash was nauseating. The sweet taste of the chocolate and strawberry turned to ash in her mouth. The gift was not a gift at all. It was a Trojan horse, a beautiful shell containing a core of rejection. Every piece of fruit she had already eaten felt tainted, a physical manifestation of the betrayal. The act was cowardly, but also creatively cruel in its timing. She had been made to participate in her own dumping, first by expressing gratitude for the weapon of her humiliation, and then by literally consuming the evidence of it. The lavishness of the arrangement made it even worse. It was a rejection with a price tag, a message that said, "I spent money on this, but I couldn't spend 5 minutes on a phone call." Colin's plan to avoid drama had, of course, backfired spectacularly. Instead of a clean, quiet break, he created a story so perfectly absurd that Hannah immediately shared pictures of the chocolate message with all of her friends, turning his attempt at a quiet exit into a legendary tale of meanness. The edible arrangement company itself even got wind of the story, later issuing a humorous statement reminding customers that their products were intended for celebrations, not cancellations. It was a breakup that demonstrated a simple truth: no amount of chocolate can sweeten a message that bitter. After turning a town square into a stage and a fruit basket into a weapon, our next story proves that in the modern era, even our heartbreaks are filtered through a screen and powered by data. This is the unsettling tale of the social media algorithm breakup. A farewell so precisely targeted it weaponized the very tools designed to connect us, using cold, hard data to deliver a deeply personal blow. Our digital Cupid, or executioner, depending on your perspective, was a tech-savvy marketer named Felix. He'd grown tired of his relationship with his girlfriend, Priya, but the idea of a face-to-face conversation filled him with dread. He wanted a method that was detached, efficient, and guaranteed to reach its one intended audience member without any messy collateral drama. His solution was as ingenious as it was chilling. He would use the hyper-specific advertising tools of his trade to serve Priya, and only Priya, a breakup notice. The platform of choice was Instagram, a place where their relationship had been carefully curated for years. Felix didn't post a story or a public photo that all their friends could see. Instead, he went into Facebook's ad manager, which powers Instagram ads, and created a new campaign. He selected the objective, brand awareness, though the brand in question was their now defunct relationship. The real genius and the true cruelty lay in the targeting. He created a custom audience with exactly one person in it, Priya. He used her email address, her phone number, and even targeted her specific device ID to ensure there was no mistake. The ad's budget was set to a mere $5 a day, just enough to guarantee she would see it repeatedly in her feed. The creative itself was a masterpiece of minimalist design. It looked like a standard, moody influencer post, a stark black and white photo of a broken hourglass. The caption, however, left no room for interpretation. It read, "This is not an ad for a watch. This is a message for Priya L. It's over. Please don't call me." He even included a call to action button, the kind that usually says "Shop now" or "Learn more." This one said "Accept," and when clicked, it simply linked to a Wikipedia article on the 5 stages of grief. For Priya, the discovery was profoundly disorienting. She was mindlessly scrolling through her Instagram feed, seeing posts from friends and ads for shoes, when her own personal nightmare appeared seamlessly between a vacation photo and a smoothie bowl. Her own name was staring back at her from a paid advertisement. The initial feeling was one of sheer violation. This wasn't a text message in the privacy of their chat. This was a message delivered by a global corporation's algorithm, inserted into her personal digital space. The platform she used to relax and connect had been hijacked and turned into a billboard for her own rejection. The creepy precision of it was what made it so unforgettable. She showed her phone to a friend sitting right next to her, who refreshed her own Instagram feed repeatedly. The ad never appeared, it was for her eyes only. This confirmed her horrifying suspicion. Felix hadn't just broken up with her, he had used the most intimate tool available, her own data and daily habits, to do it. He had commodified their breakup, purchasing her attention as if she were a demographic to be conquered rather than a person to be respected. The line between her personal life and the targeted advertising she usually ignored had been completely erased, and the result was a uniquely 21st century form of heartbreak. It was a split that felt less like a conversation and more like a software update, one that permanently uninstalled her from his life. While Felix was busy targeting his breakup through digital ads, our 13th story proves that some rejections are best delivered in ink and four-color glory. After the high-tech cruelty of a social media algorithm, we pivot to a breakup steeped in classic nostalgia, where one partner decided their final words deserved their own speech bubbles and splash pages. This is the saga of the custom comic book, a farewell so elaborately illustrated it transformed a personal heartbreak into a collector's edition of sorrow. The artist behind this graphic novel goodbye was a talented illustrator named Marcus, who had spent 2 years in a relationship with a woman named Lena, an avid comic book collector. For her, the medium wasn't just a hobby, it was a language she spoke fluently, a world of heroes, villains, and epic narratives she adored. Marcus, seeing their own story winding down, decided to break up with her in the one language he knew she would understand perfectly. He spent over a month secretly working on a 12-page, professionally bound comic book titled The Last Stand of Us. The comic itself was a brutal masterpiece of passive aggression disguised as a labor of love. The artwork was stunning, rendered in a style that perfectly mimicked Lena's favorite indie comics. The story cast the two of them as superhero partners, the Trust Avenger and Lady Compromise, fighting against a rogues gallery of their real-life relationship issues. A villain named Captain Stonewall represented Marcus's perceived inability to communicate. A monster called the Emotional Void was a shadowy beast they battled together but could never defeat. The dialogue was painfully on the nose, with thought bubbles exposing Marcus's innermost grievances that he had never actually voiced in real life. The climax of the issue saw the Trust Avenger making the heroic choice to sacrifice their partnership to save the world, delivering a final monologue about how some teams aren't meant to stay together. Marcus presented the book to Lena on their anniversary, wrapped in beautiful paper. He told her it was a special gift he'd been working on for months, a tribute to their incredible journey together. Lena, utterly thrilled and touched by what she thought was the most romantic and personal present imaginable, immediately curled up on the couch to read it, her heart swelling with affection. The first few pages filled her with joy, seeing their inside jokes and shared memories lovingly illustrated. But as she turned the pages, the story's tone began to darken. The heroic adventure slowly morphed into a tragedy, with her character becoming the inadvertent cause of their team's downfall. The final page didn't end with a promise of a next issue. It ended with her character alone, watching her partner fly away into the sunset with a caption box that read, "And so." Her greatest adventure ended, leaving her to face the world alone. The end. The delayed comprehension was the real gut punch. She finished the book with a confused smile, thinking it was a strangely bittersweet ending, and looked up at Marcus for an explanation. He simply took the book from her hands, pointed to the small print on the very last page, right above the comic's copyright information. It read, "This isn't a story. It's goodbye, please don't contact me again." The anniversary gift wasn't a celebration, it was a critique, an illustrated list of her every failing, and a breakup notice, all bound in a glossy cover. The medium he chose made the rejection infinitely more painful. He hadn't just left her, he had immortalized his version of their failure in a permanent, artistic format, something she could physically hold and revisit. The very thing she loved most had been used as the weapon to hurt her. That custom comic book likely still sits on her shelf, a permanent, full-color monument to the day her relationship ended, not with a conversation, but with a cliffhanger she never saw coming. After weaponizing social media ads and immortalizing a breakup in comic book form, our 14th story brings the drama down to a more tactile yet equally cruel level. This is the account of the fake lottery ticket, a prank that turned a moment of potential life-changing joy into a soul-crushing revelation, all hidden beneath a thin layer of scratch-off latex. The schemer was a man named Derek who had decided to end his relationship with his girlfriend, Amanda, but wanted to do it in a way that he felt was memorable. His plan was a study in psychological whiplash. He spent days online researching how to create a realistic-looking fake lottery ticket, eventually settling on a design that mimicked a popular $10 win big instant game. He meticulously printed it on cardstock, ensuring the weight and feel were perfect, and even used a special metallic scratch-off coating to cover the play area, making the reveal feel authentic. The genius of his design and its true cruelty lay in the revealed symbols. Underneath the coating, he didn't use the standard numbers or playing cards. Instead, he printed 3 matching symbols, a single, stark, broken heart. The delivery was calculated for maximum impact. He presented the ticket to Amanda on a random Tuesday, telling her he'd bought it on a whim and had a good feeling about it. He even filmed her with his phone, ostensibly to capture her joyful reaction to a potential win, but in reality, to document the moment her world collapsed. Amanda, completely unsuspecting and swept up in the excitement, took a coin from her wallet. With Derek's camera rolling and his eager encouragement, she began to scratch. The first symbol emerged, a broken heart. She paused, her smile faltering for a second, assuming it was just an odd, unlucky icon. She moved to the second spot, scratching carefully. Another identical broken heart. Her laughter became a little more nervous, a confused, "What does this mean?" escaping her lips. Derek just urged her on, his voice a mask of feigned excitement, telling her to get the last one. The third and final scratch confirmed the horrific truth. 3 broken hearts. There was no win message. Instead, in the prize box where a monetary amount should have been, were the words, "You lost." We're through. The delayed realization was captured in high definition. Her face cycled through confusion, dawning comprehension, and finally, a wave of utter devastation. The coin dropped from her hand, the ticket fluttered to the floor. The man she loved had not only broken up with her, but he had done it by building her up to an incredible high, only to orchestrate the most painful crash possible. The act of scratching off the ticket, a moment of playful anticipation, was now permanently redefined as the exact moment her heart was broken. Derek's belief that this was a clever and memorable exit was, of course, a catastrophic miscalculation. Instead of simply ending a relationship, he created a core memory of betrayal and humiliation. Amanda later shared the video with close friends, and the story spread, making Derek a local legend for all the wrong reasons. The fake lottery ticket became a perfect metaphor for their entire relationship, a shiny, promising exterior that concealed a devastatingly empty prize. It was a breakup that proved you can't put a price on heartache, but you can certainly disguise it as a winning ticket. Imagine the scene. The smell of wood smoke and roasted turkey leg hangs in the air. The sound of clanging blacksmith hammers rings out, and all around you, people in meticulously hand-stitched colonial-era costumes are debating the stamp act or churning butter. This was the setting for one of the most bizarrely contextual breakups ever recorded. A split that weaponized historical accuracy for a very modern heartbreak. Our 15th story takes us to a sprawling Revolutionary War reenactment in rural Virginia. where one man decided that the most appropriate way to end his relationship was to do it in front of a crowd of confused history buffs in character, and in the year 1776. The star of this period piece drama was a man named Samuel, a deeply committed reenactor who felt his 2-year relationship with his girlfriend, Clara, was distracting him from his true passion, living authentically in the 18th century. Rather than have a 21st century conversation, he saw an opportunity during the weekend's big battle reenactment. He convinced the event organizers to let him and a few friends stage a small, extra skit for the gathered spectators. A personal farewell he billed as a dramatic interpretation of a period-appropriate personal dissolution. They agreed, assuming it was just another layer of immersive entertainment. Clara, who had reluctantly agreed to attend the event, was watching from the crowd as the scheduled battle concluded. As the Redcoats retreated and the Colonials cheered, Samuel and 2 of his friends broke from the main group and marched to the center of the field. Samuel, in his mud-spattered breeches and tricorn hat, then launched into a soliloquy delivered with Shakespearean gravitas. He wasn't Samuel anymore, he was Ezekiel, a heartsick farmer. He proclaimed to the heavens and the baffled audience about a fair maid who had stolen the very warmth from his hearth and the purpose from his plough. The dialogue was a bizarre mix of archaic English and very specific modern grievances. Forsooth, thy constant scrolling upon that tiny magic mirror hath built a wall of silence betwixt us more formidable than any British fortification. He declared, pointing a trembling finger directly at Clara in the crowd. The spectators, a mix of families and hardcore history enthusiasts, were initially captivated. They murmured appreciatively at the actor's commitment, assuming the tiny magic mirror was some clever metaphor for a letter or a distant rumor. But as Samuel's character, Ezekiel, grew more impassioned, the script became uncomfortably personal. I shall not abide another winter with one whose heart is as cold as a New England frost and whose loyalty is as fleeting as a summer squall, he cried, pulling a locket from his waistcoat, a real locket Clara had given him, and throwing it dramatically into the dirt. The final line left no room for doubt. Breaking character just slightly, he looked right at her and said, "I hereby declare my independence from thee, Clara. The union is dissolved, God save the king, or not, I care not." With that, he turned on his heel and marched away, his friends following as a fife and drum corps struck up a tune, completely unaware they had just provided the soundtrack to a real-life breakup. The confusion was absolute. A few people in the crowd clapped politely, thinking it was a strangely somber end to the day's festivities. Most were just deeply confused, trying to pass the early modern English to understand what they had just witnessed. For Clara, the experience was a surreal nightmare of public humiliation. Dozens of people turned to look at her, their expressions a mixture of pity and bewildered curiosity. She was left standing there in jeans and a t-shirt, surrounded by people in petticoats and waistcoats, having been broken up within a language that wasn't even her own. The ride home, still in character as a heartbroken farmer, must have been utterly silent. Samuel got his dramatic, historically accurate exit, but in doing so, he turned a shared hobby into a stage for his own cowardice, ensuring that for Clara, the sound of a fife would forever be a reminder of the day she was dumped for the sake of theatrical authenticity. While Samuel was busy declaring his independence in the 18th century, our next breakup story catapults us firmly back into the digital age, proving that even the most mundane technologies can be repurposed for a farewell. This is the story of the voice note vanish, a disappearing act that turned a simple voicemail box into a relentless, automated breakup machine, leaving one person trapped in a cruel loop of technological rejection. The culprit was a woman named Zoe, who had reached her wit's end with her boyfriend, Mark, and his infuriating habit of avoiding her calls whenever a difficult conversation loomed. Tired of being sent straight to voicemail, she decided to use the very tool of his avoidance against him. She didn't change her status or post a cryptic story. she went straight to the source of her frustration, her own voicemail greeting. In a moment of cold fury, she recorded a new outgoing message. It wasn't the standard "I'm not available" recording. Instead, callers were greeted by her voice, calm and clear, delivering a message meant for one set of ears only. The greeting was a masterpiece of concise brutality. After the standard beep, her voice would say, "You've reached Zoe. I'm not answering because I'm done. Mark, if this is you, we are over. Do not call me again. Everyone else, leave a message and I'll get back to you. Thanks." She then saved the recording and went about her day, knowing that the next time Mark tried to dodge her or anyone else called, they would be personally informed of the split. For Mark, the discovery was a special kind of frustrating hell. After a minor argument, he did what he always did: let her call go to voicemail, expecting to deal with it later when things had cooled down. When he called back an hour later to apologize, he was met not with her familiar greeting, but with the new, devastating recording. His first instinct was disbelief. He called again, thinking he must have misdialed or misheard. The message played again, word for word. He called a third time, then a fourth, then a fifth, each time hearing the same final, unchangeable verdict delivered in her calm, recorded tone. His own avoidance had backfired spectacularly. Every attempt to reach out only resulted in him being broken up with again and again by an automated message. He couldn't argue with a recording. He couldn't ask for clarification. He was stuck in a digital purgatory of his own making, forced to listen to his own dismissal on an infinite loop. The message stayed active for a staggering 3 weeks. For that entire time, anytime any one of their mutual friends, her parents, or even a telemarketer called her phone, they were treated to the announcement of their breakup. Mark was faced with the unbearable social fallout of knowing that every person in their shared circle was being informed, one by one, as they happened to call her. He couldn't preemptively tell his side of the story because he never knew who had already heard the news via her voicemail. The power dynamic was completely upended. Zoe had found a way to be permanently unavailable while simultaneously making her final statement the last word, literally repeating itself to anyone who tried to bridge the gap. It was a breakup that weaponized passive aggression with digital precision, proving that sometimes the most effective way to end things is to simply change your outgoing message and let technology do the dirty work. While voicemail offered a digital cold shoulder, our 17th story brings the breakup right to your doorstep, appealing to a far more primal sense: hunger. This is the tale of the personalized pizza message, a culinary coup that turned a universal comfort food into a vehicle for one of the most deliciously awkward dismissals imaginable. Our setting is a quiet Tuesday evening in Chicago, where a man named Ben decided that if he was going to end his relationship with his girlfriend, Chloe, he might as well get a dinner out of the deal. Ben's plan was a masterpiece of low-effort, high-impact pettiness. He called his and Chloe's favorite local pizzeria, a place called Tony's Napolitana, and placed a delivery order for their usual, a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese. But when the employee asked if he wanted any special instructions, Ben didn't ask for well-done crust or light sauce. Instead, he made a very specific request. "Can you please spell out the words 'I'm done' on the pizza using the pepperoni?" The employee, likely having seen it all in the pizza business, simply repeated the order back with a flat, professional tone. 1 large pepperoni, extra cheese with 'I'm done' spelled out in Ronnie. Got it? The delivery driver, a college student named Miguel just trying to make his tips, was the unwitting agent of chaos in this scenario. He picked up the box, unaware of its unique payload, and made his way to Chloe's apartment. When she answered the door, she was pleasantly surprised. She assumed the pizza was a peace offering or a spontaneous gesture of affection from Ben, who had been distant lately. She happily signed the receipt, gave Miguel a generous tip, and carried the warm, fragrant box to her kitchen counter, her stomach growling in anticipation. The moment of truth arrived as she lifted the cardboard lid. Instead of the familiar, random scatter of pepperoni, her eyes were met with a carefully arranged message. The salty, curled meat slices formed 3 unmistakable words right in the center of the cheese: "I'm done." The shock was so complete that she simply stared at it, her brain refusing to process the information. Was this a joke, a terribly misjudged prank? She called Ben, her voice a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. He didn't answer. Instead, a text message came through a moment later. It read, "Did the pizza arrive? Hope you're hungry." The sheer casual cruelty of the follow-up text was the final twist of the knife. He wasn't just breaking up with her, he was doing it with a side of glib commentary. Poor Miguel, the delivery driver, became an accidental part of the story. About 20 minutes later, as he was finishing his shift, the pizzeria called him. Chloe had phoned the restaurant, not to complain, but in a state of bewildered distress, asking if they often delivered breakup pizzas. The manager, equal parts amused and apologetic, had to explain to Miguel that his last delivery had been a catalyst for romantic dissolution. For Miguel, it was just another weird night on the job, but for Chloe, the memory was permanently forged. The comforting smell of pizza, once associated with date nights and happy moments, was now tainted. She couldn't even look at a pepperoni without seeing those 3 little words staring back at her, a greasy monument to a relationship that ended not with a bang, but with a delivered entree. After the greasy finality of a pepperoni proclamation, our next story trades casual cruelty for a far more psychologically complex form of farewell, one that weaponized nostalgia itself. This is the account of the scavenger hunt of sorrow, a meticulously planned emotional journey that forced one person to physically retrace the entire painful history of a dying relationship, with the breakup waiting at the final destination. The architect was a woman named Isabel, a writer who believed her relationship with her boyfriend, Leo, deserved a finale with narrative weight. Instead of a simple conversation, she designed an elaborate scavenger hunt, presenting it to him as a fun, romantic adventure to rekindle their spark. Leo, always up for a game, eagerly agreed, completely unaware that the path he was about to follow was a guided tour of their demise. Isabel's genius and her cruelty lay in her choice of locations. Each clue did not lead to a place of happy memories, but to the exact spot where they had their most devastating arguments. The first clue led him to a specific bench in a downtown park. The note read, "Find the place where you first accused me of not listening." Leo arrived confused, the memory of that bitter evening rushing back. Taped underneath the bench was the next clue, which directed him to the parking lot of a movie theater with the message, "Remember the night you walked out halfway through the film because I liked a different actor." Each subsequent location was another landmark in their history of conflict. A particular booth in a diner where they'd fought over money, a street corner where a vacation plan had disintegrated into a screaming match, even the aisle of a grocery store where a disagreement over which cereal to buy had somehow spiraled into a silent treatment that lasted 2 days. The emotional toll on Leo was immense and cumulative. What began as a confusing puzzle quickly became a grueling pilgrimage through every raw and unhealed wound in their relationship. By the 4th stop, he wasn't just solving clues, he was reliving the anger, the hurt, and the sadness of each fight. The adventure was a form of psychological torture, forcing him to physically stand in the places where their connection had fractured, all under the false pretense of fixing it. The final clue led him to the quiet overlook where they had shared their first kiss. For a moment, Leo felt a surge of hope, thinking the painful journey had been a test and this was the happy ending. But waiting for him wasn't Isabel with open arms. Instead, resting on the guardrail was a single, final envelope. Inside was a printed, numbered list titled "Reasons We Don't Work." It cited every argument he had just revisited, now coldly quantified. At the bottom, in lieu of a signature, she had written, "You just walked through all the evidence. The verdict is obvious, it's over." The romantic setting of their beginning was now the stage for their end, the beauty of the view starkly contrasting with the ugliness of the conclusion. The hunt's impact was profound and lasting. For Leo, the entire city was now psychologically mapped with pain. He couldn't pass the diner or drive by the park without a visceral flashback to that day. Isabel had achieved a horrifyingly complete form of closure. She had made him understand her reasons by making him physically and emotionally endure them. It was a breakup that didn't just state the problems, it made him walk a mile in each and every one of their shoes, ensuring he would never, ever forget why they had to part ways. While some breakups are delivered through puzzles or pizza, our 19th story proves that when a musician gets their heart broken, the whole world might just get a new hit single out of the deal. This is the saga of the breakup song release, a tale of heartbreak, artistic vengeance, and the uniquely modern horror of discovering you've been immortalized as the villain in a chart-climbing anthem. The protagonist of this musical vendetta was an aspiring indie pop artist named Jasper. After a painful split from his long-term girlfriend, Eliza, he did what many songwriters do: he channeled his anguish into his art. But Jasper didn't just scribble a sad poem in a notebook, he went full-scale professional. He booked time at a local recording studio, hired session musicians, and even commissioned a close friend to direct a high-concept music video. The resulting track was a synth-pop earworm titled Eliza, Please Just Let Me Breathe, a title that left very little to the imagination. The lyrics were a masterclass in passive-aggressive specificity, detailing everything from her habit of leaving cupboard doors open to her alleged emotional manipulation, all set to an infectiously danceable beat. The chorus was the real hook, both musically and cruelly. Eliza, please just let me breathe / you took my love and my Wi-Fi password. Now I gotta leave / you said we were forever, but forever's such a lie / now I'm changing all my locks and telling you goodbye. Jasper had expertly blurred the line between genuine emotion and petty grievance, crafting a song that was both deeply personal and bizarrely relatable to anyone who's ever been annoyed by a partner's domestic habits. The real launch, however, was the music video. It featured an actor bearing a striking resemblance to Eliza, portrayed as a chaotic, black-clad figure who followed the Jasper character around, literally tying him up with red yarn and rearranging the furniture in his apartment while he slept. The video quickly garnered attention for its stylish cinematography and its unsubtle metaphor, racking up thousands of views on YouTube from viewers who had no idea they were watching a very expensive, very public airing of dirty laundry. For Eliza, the discovery was not a private, painful moment but a public avalanche. It began with a cryptic text from a distant cousin, "Hey, is this song about you?" attached with a link to the track on Spotify. Then another friend messaged and another. By the end of the day, her Instagram DMs were flooded with links to the video and screenshots of the most damning lyrics. The humiliation was absolute and multi-layered. Not only had Jasper broken up with her in the most permanent way possible, by pressing it onto a digital album, but he had also cast her as the insane ex-girlfriend in a narrative seen by thousands of strangers. Commenters on the video were already dissecting her character, siding with Jasper, and making memes out of her fictionalized portrayal. The song gained a small but noticeable amount of traction, even landing on a popular Breakup Bangers playlist on the streaming service, which meant the auditory evidence of her rejection was now being algorithmically recommended to heartbroken people everywhere. Eliza was forced into a terrible position. To publicly acknowledge it would only fuel the fire, but to stay silent felt like allowing a false narrative to define her. Jasper, meanwhile, gave interviews to indie music blogs, speaking cryptically about drawing inspiration from real life and the pain of liberation, carefully cultivating his image as a sensitive artist while his ex endured a silent digital shaming. It was a breakup that demonstrated a new kind of power in the digital age, the power to not just end a relationship but to permanently control its story, turning private pain into public content for everyone to stream, share, and judge. After exploring the raw emotional fallout of a musical takedown, our 20th story showcases a breakup that borrowed the authority and gravitas of broadcast journalism to deliver its final verdict. This is the chronicle of the fake news report, a meticulously produced piece of cinematic deception where one person decided their split wasn't just a personal matter, but a breaking news event worthy of a full television segment. The auteur behind this elaborate hoax was a film school graduate named Owen, who had spent the better part of his post-college years working as a video editor for a local news affiliate. After his girlfriend of 3 years, Maya, ended things with him over what he deemed trivial reasons, he became obsessed with having the last word and having it with unimpeachable authority. Using his access to professional editing software, a green screen, and a friend who bore a passing resemblance to a famous evening news anchor, Owen spent a month producing a 2-minute fake news segment titled "Love Lost: A Local Romance Meets Its End." The production value was terrifyingly authentic. Owen's friend, anchor Mike, delivered the report with the somber, weighty tone reserved for political scandals or natural disasters. The segment opened with a recognizable swell of the network's theme music and a slick graphic that read, "Relationship Recall." The report cut between the anchor at his desk and what appeared to be file footage, actually just photos of Owen and Maya that Owen had doctored to look grainy and distant, as if captured by a paparazzi lens. A chyron at the bottom of the screen scrolls with a ticker that reads, "Sources confirm irreconcilable differences, emotional infrastructure in shambles." The script was a masterpiece of pseudo-journalistic jargon, reporting on the collapse of the relationship as if it were a corporation declaring bankruptcy. Anchor Mike cited unnamed, close sources who revealed a fundamental instability in the partnership's core philosophy and a critical failure in the trust department. The segment even included a fabricated relationship expert, played by another of Owen's friends, who provided analysis on why the merger was doomed from the start. The report concluded with the anchor looking solemnly into the camera and stating, "And so the story of Owen and Maya comes to a close, a tale of love, promise, and ultimately a lesson in emotional economics." Back to you, Diane. Owen's moment of delivery was calculated for maximum shock. He knew Maya had a ritual of watching the evening news with her roommates. He waited until the precise night and time, then texted her a link with the message, "Thought you should see this, it's kind of big news." The link led to a private YouTube video, unlisted and titled only with the date. Puzzled, Maya clicked it, her roommates gathering around her phone. As the familiar news music swelled and the anchor began speaking, their initial confusion turned to stunned, horrified silence as they realized the top story was the intimate details of Maya's own failed relationship, presented with the cold, factual distance of a news report. The psychological impact was profound. The format itself was a form of gaslighting, the use of the news aesthetic with its implied objectivity and fact-checking made the deeply subjective and one-sided narrative feel like an official, incontrovertible truth. For Maya, it wasn't just an angry ex venting. It was her life being framed as a public spectacle and a case study in failure, complete with expert commentary. The fact that her roommates witnessed it amplified the humiliation 100-fold, turning her private grief into a shared, awkward spectacle for her closest friends. In the days that followed, Owen's attempt to control the narrative backfired spectacularly. While he may have felt vindicated by his creative vengeance, the video didn't stay private for long. One of Maya's roommates, incensed by the audacity of it, saved a copy and shared it within their wider friend group. The story, and eventually the video itself, spread like wildfire, making Owen a notorious figure far beyond his own social circle. His professional reputation took a hit as people questioned the ethics of someone who would misuse their skills for such a personal and cruel attack. Owen had wanted to break up with the finality of a news bulletin, but he forgot one crucial thing. In the court of public opinion, the person who looks the most unhinged is usually the one who produced the fake news report. If you thought staging a fake news report was an over-the-top way to end a relationship, our 21st story takes theatricality to a literally breathtaking level. This is the account of the escape artist act, a breakup that transformed personal liberation into a death-defying public spectacle, hiring a professional to make a metaphor out of chains, locks, and a very large tank of water. The visionary behind this aquatic allegory was a man named Felix, who felt his relationship with his boyfriend, Julian, had become a prison of routine and emotional constraint. A simple "we need to talk" felt insufficient to capture the magnitude of his felt imprisonment. Being a man of considerable financial means and dramatic flair, Felix decided he needed a grand, symbolic gesture to represent his break for freedom. He didn't just want to leave Julian, he wanted to stage a performance about it. So he did what any reasonable person would do. He went online and hired a professional escape artist for a private gig. The performer, a local stuntman who went by the stage name The Amazing Alvaro, was initially skeptical when Felix outlined his request. Alvaro was accustomed to corporate events and birthday parties, not serving as a mercenary in someone's romantic dissolution. But the offered fee, reportedly over $3,000, convinced him to play along. The plan was meticulously crafted. Alvaro would be introduced to Julian as a surprise street performer Felix had hired for a fun date night in the park. The stunt would be an escape from a straitjacket while chained to a heavy weight, and the climax would involve a symbolic twist Felix had written into the script. The performance unfolded on a sunny Saturday afternoon in a crowded San Francisco park. Julian, completely unsuspecting, watched with amused curiosity as Alvaro, in full stage regalia, began his act. He had Julian help lock the chains, adding a layer of intimate complicity to the bizarre scene. As Alvaro struggled dramatically against his constraints, Felix began a monologue that slowly revealed its true purpose. He spoke about feeling trapped, about the weight of expectations, about the need to break free from bonds that once felt safe but had become suffocating. Julian's smile began to falter as he realized the show was not just for entertainment. The grand finale was the piece de resistance. After freeing himself from the straitjacket and locks, Alvaro, as per Felix's specific instructions, turned to Julian, held up the final, opened padlock, and declared in a booming stage voice, "And thus, with this final act, he is free. The contract is broken, the escape is complete." He then bowed deeply to Felix, who gave a slight, solemn nod of acknowledgement. The handful of gathered onlookers who had stopped to watch a cool stunt broke into confused, scattered applause, completely unaware they had just witnessed a paid actor facilitating a real-life breakup. For Julian, the moment was one of surreal and public humiliation. The metaphorical meaning was crashingly obvious, but the delivery was so absurdly over the top that he was left speechless, standing in the grass with a discarded chain at his feet. The use of a paid professional added a layer of chilling detachment. Felix hadn't even done the emotional labor of delivering the message himself. He had outsourced his liberation to a hired gun, turning the most intimate of rejections into a transactional performance. The park, once a place for picnics and lazy afternoons, was now permanently etched in his memory as the stage for his own deeply weird and humiliating farewell. Felix got his dramatic metaphor, but in the process he proved that some escapes are less about freedom and more about making a spectacularly self-absorbed exit. After the high drama of underwater escapes and fake news reports, our next tale brings the energy down to a more intimate, yet equally devious level of pettiness. This is the story of the customized candy wrappers, a breakup that proved even the sweetest of treats can be filled with the most bitter of messages, all hiding in plain sight within a seemingly innocent glass jar. The mastermind was a woman named Chloe who had reached the end of her rope with her boyfriend, Ben, and his maddening habit of never taking a hint. She needed a method that was final, impossible to ignore, and that would land with maximum impact during a moment of casual comfort. Her weapon of choice, his absolute favorite candy, those small, foil-wrapped chocolate balls with the crispy shells. Chloe went online and found a company that specialized in custom-printed candy wrappers, placing an order for 200 of them. The standard shiny foil was replaced with a matte, paper-like material, and on each one she had printed a different, meticulously crafted breakup message. The messages themselves were a masterclass in variation. Some were blunt and direct, "We're through," and "It's over." Others were more specific, calling out his flaws. "I'm breaking up with you because you never load the dishwasher properly." Or, "This is the end. Also, your snoring is unbearable." A few were even philosophical. "Our journey together has reached its final destination. Please exit the relationship." She then spent an entire evening carefully unwrapping the original candies, discarding the standard foil, and rewrapping each chocolate ball in her new, personalized message of despair. She filled a large, clear glass apothecary jar with them, a jar that usually sat on their coffee table, filled with ordinary, store-bought candy, and waited. The moment of discovery arrived on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday evening. Ben had settled into his usual spot on the couch to watch a game, his hand automatically reaching into the jar for a sweet snack without him even looking away from the screen. He grabbed a handful of the candies, popped the first one into his mouth, and began to absently unwrap the second. It was only as he was flattening the wrapper to toss it aside that he noticed the text. He squinted, reading the words, "I deserve better than you," aloud, his voice laced with confusion. Assuming it was a bizarre misprint or a prank candy, he reached for another. That one read, "Don't bother calling me." A third said, "I've met someone else." With a growing sense of dread, he dumped the entire jar onto the coffee table. A cascade of shiny chocolate balls rolled everywhere, each one encased in a tiny, printed declaration of his relationship's demise. It was a piñata of heartbreak. The psychological impact was slow and devastating. This wasn't a single, sharp shock, but a death by 1,000 tiny cuts. Each wrapper he unwrapped delivered another small, specific blow. The act of eating the candy, a simple pleasure he associated with relaxing at home with Chloe, was now transformed into a grueling process of self-inflicted rejection. He had to physically participate in his own dumping, unwrapping each piece of evidence with his own hands. The jar, a symbol of shared domesticity and comfort, had been weaponized, its entire contents replaced with poison pill messages. Chloe had turned their home and his most habitual comfort into a minefield, ensuring that even a simple craving for chocolate would now come with a side of unforgettable, customized anguish. But if you thought customized candy wrappers were a personal touch, our 23rd story launches us straight into the future of farewells, a breakup that existed only in the digital ether, visible through the lens of a smartphone. This is the chronicle of the augmented reality breakup, a high-tech ghosting that turned an entire city into a haunted graveyard of memories, accessible only through a custom-built app. The architect was a brilliant but emotionally avoidant software developer named Leo. After his relationship with his girlfriend, Maya, ended, he found himself unable to move on, haunted by the physical spaces they had once shared. But instead of avoiding these places, he decided to reclaim them through the technology he knew best. Using a popular augmented reality development platform, he spent weeks building a private, location-based AR experience. The concept was simple yet devastating. Anyone with the app and the correct password would see digital breakup messages and 3D models overlaid onto specific, real-world locations when viewed through their phone's camera. The technology itself was chillingly sophisticated. Leo used precise GPS coordinates and image recognition, programming the app to trigger its digital content only when the phone's camera was pointed at the exact facade of their favorite coffee shop, the specific park bench where they had their first kiss, or the doorway of her apartment building. The messages weren't just text, they were full audiovisual spectacles. Pointing her phone at the coffee shop might cause an animated, weeping cartoon heart to appear hovering over the entrance with a speech bubble that read, "This is where you said you loved me." You were lying. Aiming at the park bench could trigger a ghostly, transparent model of the two of them sitting together, which would then dramatically fracture into 1,000 digital pieces. The true coup de grace was the delivery. Leo didn't send Maya a long email explaining himself. He simply texted her a link to download the app from a private server and a 4-digit passcode. The message that accompanied it was ominously simple. "I left you something, you'll need this to see it." Driven by a mixture of curiosity and dread, Maya downloaded the application. What followed was a days-long, self-guided tour of her own emotional devastation. She walked through her city, her phone held up like a window into a parallel, heartbreaking dimension. Every significant location now had a permanent, digital scar that only she could see. The experience was isolating and surreal. She could be standing on a busy street corner, tears streaming down her face as her phone displayed a cruel message, while everyone around her saw nothing but ordinary buildings and traffic. The app even had a final, cruel feature, a map view that charted a precise route through all the tagged locations, effectively creating a breakup tour of their relationship. It ended at the riverfront where the app's final message materialized, a large floating digital banner that read, "The End," before the application crashed and became completely unresponsive, deleting all its data. Leo had not only broken up with her, he had created an interactive monument to their failure, a personalized ghost story that only existed in the space between the real world and the digital one. It was a farewell so modern and so utterly detached that it made a clean break impossible. He had essentially haunted her reality, ensuring that the memories of their relationship would now always be viewed through a lens of his own bitter design. While Leo was busy digitally haunting the cityscape with his augmented reality breakup, our 24th story takes a more analog yet equally public approach to calling it quits. This is the saga of the breakup booth, a tale of one person turning a community celebration into their own personal stage for dissolution, offering heartbreak consultations between cotton candy and carnival games. The mastermind was a woman named Brenda who had decided her relationship with her boyfriend, Gary, had run its course, but Brenda wasn't just any disillusioned partner. She was a local artist and known eccentric in her small Midwestern town. Rather than have a private conversation, she saw an opportunity in the town's annual summer fair, a gathering of hundreds of residents all in one place, all in a festive mood. She applied for a vendor's permit not to sell lemonade or handmade crafts, but to offer a service she called Dr. Heartache's Breakup Consultations. Her application, which described it as a performance art piece on the nature of modern relationships, was approved by the slightly bewildered fair committee. The booth itself was a masterpiece of ironic design. Brenda constructed a small, whimsical shack painted a mournful shade of purple with a shingle that featured a dramatically broken heart. The front counter was adorned with black velvet and had a single, ornate, gold-painted chair for the client. A large, hand-painted sign listed her services with a sense of gravitas: breakup strategy $0, closure counseling $0, sympathetic ear priceless. She even had a small, old-fashioned cash register that was, of course, empty. Brenda herself dressed the part, wearing a dramatic black gown, a wide-brimmed hat with a veil, and oversized plastic pearls, fully committing to the character of Dr. Heartache. The public interactions were the core of the performance. Throughout the day, fairgoers approached the booth, giggling and assuming it was all a big joke. Brenda, staying perfectly in character with a somber, theatrical tone, would offer them absurdly specific and humorous advice. She'd tell a teenager to break up with their boyfriend via a message in a fortune cookie, or advise an older couple to settle their dispute with a pie-eating contest. The small crowd that gathered around the booth laughed and applauded, completely unaware that they were witnessing the warm-up act for a real, devastating finale. The main event was scheduled. Brenda had secretly instructed a friend to casually bring Gary to her area of the fair around 3 p.m., under the guise of checking out a really funny art project. Gary, unsuspecting and clutching a giant stuffed bear he just won, was nudged toward the front of the small crowd as Brenda announced she was ready for her next client. He stepped up to the booth, laughing, assuming he was about to be the butt of a light-hearted joke. Brenda, however, dropped the comedic act. Her expression shifted from theatrical sorrow to genuine, chilling seriousness. She looked directly at him, and in a clear, calm voice that carried over the din of the fair, she said, "Welcome, sir. Please have a seat. Your consultation is about to begin." As Gary sat down, confused but still smiling, Brenda launched into her prepared speech. But this wasn't a generic bit. It was a pointed, specific, and brutally honest critique of their relationship, delivered with the unflinching authority of a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. She cited his lack of ambition, his habit of interrupting her, and his refusal to ever plan a date, all while a ring of their friends, neighbors, and complete strangers listened in. The festive atmosphere of the fair created a horrifying contrast. The cheerful calliope music from the carousel, the shrieks of laughter from the roller coaster, and the smell of funnel cakes provided a grotesquely upbeat soundtrack to Gary's very public humiliation. He sat frozen in the ornate chair, the stuffed bear slipping from his grip, his face shifting from confusion to dawning horror to utter mortification. He couldn't yell or argue without causing a bigger scene. He was trapped in a narrative of his own failure, written and directed by Brenda with the entire town as her audience. When she finished, she simply rang the empty cash register, handed him a receipt that was actually a printed list of his flaws, and said, "Thank you for your business. This consultation is complete." She then turned to the next person in line and asked, "How can I help you mend your broken heart?" as if nothing had happened. Gary had to stand up and walk away through a crowd of people who were now avoiding his gaze, their pity and second-hand embarrassment a palpable force. Brenda had achieved her goal with terrifying efficiency. She had broken up with him in the most definitive way possible, ensuring there would be no messy follow-up conversations because the entire town had already heard her closing argument. The breakup booth wasn't just a stunt, it was a social atom bomb, and Gary was left standing at ground zero. While some breakups scream from billboards and others are whispered through augmented reality, our 25th story takes a more subtle, almost espionage-like approach to severing ties. This is the tale of the anonymous classified ad, a farewell so deeply encoded it turned the personal section of a local newspaper into a private battlefield of wits, where the only weapon was a shared history and the only casualty was the truth. The strategist behind this cryptic curtain call was a man named Arthur, a linguistics professor who viewed the disintegration of his relationship with his partner, Clara, as a complex text to be decoded rather than a conversation to be had. He needed a method of departure that was utterly final, yet one that spared him the messy emotional labor of a face-to-face confrontation. His solution was a masterpiece of misdirection, hidden in the most unlikely of places, the classified ads of the Wall Street Journal. He chose the publication not for its wide readership, but for its sober, serious tone, knowing Clara's morning ritual involved a thorough perusal of its pages with her second cup of coffee. The ad itself was a work of art in minimalism and personal reference. It read, "Wanted, single owner for one slightly used heart, no longer required by its previous keeper after the incident at the lighthouse. Inquire within, Box 724, To any other reader, it was a bizarre, almost poetic non sequitur, easily lost between ads for financial advisors and antique furniture. But for Clara, it was a key turning in a lock only she possessed. The phrase, "the incident at the lighthouse," was not a generic allusion to drama. It was a meticulously chosen shard of their shared past. It referred to a specific, terrible argument they'd had 2 years prior during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. A fight that had begun over something trivial but had revealed a fundamental crack in their foundation that they had never truly repaired. It was their personal shorthand for the moment things began to irrevocably unravel, a memory so painful and private that its appearance in a public forum was nothing short of a violation. The discovery was not immediate. Clara read the ad on a Tuesday, her eyes scanning the column out of habit. She saw it, her brain registered the strange wording, and she almost turned the page. But something, a nagging sense of familiarity, made her pause. She read it again. The incident at the lighthouse. Her blood ran cold. She looked at the box number. 724. Their anniversary was July 24th. The pieces clicked together with a horrifying, silent finality. This wasn't a random ad, it was a message. It was the message. Arthur hadn't just broken up with her, he had done it through a coded announcement, forcing her to connect the dots herself, and in doing so, relive the very memory that had started their decline. The emotional impact was uniquely torturous because of the delay. For those few seconds between reading and understanding, she existed in a state of normalcy, which made the subsequent realization all the more jarring. There was no yelling, no dramatic scene. There was just the quiet rustle of the newspaper in her hands and the deafening silence of a relationship ending in her mind. She was left alone with the evidence, a participant in her own dismissal. The ad ran for a week, a daily reminder in black and white that she was now officially a previous keeper. Arthur had achieved a chillingly clean exit. He never had to see her cry, never had to answer a difficult question. He had simply planted a seed in the public record and trusted that her intellect and their history would do the rest, ensuring his departure was as quiet, clever, and utterly cowardly as he had intended. Imagine the hushed anticipation of a packed black box theater on opening night, the air thick with the scent of stage dust and expectation. For months, a playwright named Julian had been laboring over his magnum opus, a semi-autobiographical drama about a couple navigating the complexities of modern love. His partner, Sophia, had been his muse, his first reader, his unwavering supporter through the grueling writing process. What she didn't know was that the script she'd helped him refine contained a devastating final rewrite, a scene he'd added during last-minute rehearsals without her knowledge. The play, titled The Unreliable Narrator, was about to become horrifyingly true to its name. The performance unfolded normally for the first 2 acts. The audience, which included Sophia proudly seated in the front row, was captivated by the raw, emotional dialogue that so clearly mirrored Julian and Sophia's own relationship. They saw their inside jokes performed on stage, their tender moments reenacted, even their most passionate arguments given dramatic weight. Sophia watched with a mixture of pride and mild self-consciousness, assuming the play was Julian's ultimate love letter to their bond, a public declaration of their unique connection. The final act began, and the climactic scene arrived, a monumental fight between the 2 lead characters that would decide their fate. But the dialogue took a sharp, unexpected turn. The actor playing Julian's stand-in began delivering lines that were not in the program, lines that were far too specific to be fiction. He cited the exact brand of Sophia's shampoo that he claimed he hated the smell of. He brought up a private joke she had with her father. He even referenced the amount of money she had in her savings account, details no one else could possibly know. The actor's performance shifted from scripted anger to a chilling, direct address. He broke the fourth wall, turning to stare directly into the spotlight, illuminating the audience, and said, "And that's why, Sophia, this isn't just a performance. This is the truth. Our story ends right here, right now, in front of all these witnesses." The silence in the theater was absolute, broken only by the faint, sharp intake of Sophia's breath. The other actors on stage stood frozen, some with genuine confusion on their faces, suggesting this brutal ad-lib was a surprise to them as well. All eyes in the audience swiveled from the stage to Sophia, whose face in the front row was a mask of utter shock and dawning horror. The line between art and reality had not just been blurred, it had been detonated. Julian, watching from the tech booth at the back of the theater, had orchestrated the most public, most humiliating, and most creatively cruel breakup imaginable. He had used her support, her trust, and their most intimate secrets as fuel for his grand finale, turning a night meant to celebrate his art into a live execution of their relationship. The curtain call was a spectacle of surreal awkwardness. The actors took their bows to scattered, confused applause, the audience uncertain if what they had witnessed was part of the show or a horrific breach of theatrical etiquette. Sophia did not stand for an ovation. She remained seated, a statue of mortification, as people around her whispered and pointed. Julian had achieved his desired dramatic effect, but in doing so, he sacrificed any semblance of decency. He didn't just end a relationship, he violated the sacred trust of the stage, betrayed his caste, and publicly eviscerated his partner's dignity, all for the sake of a shocking third-act twist that nobody asked for and nobody would ever forget. Moving from the dramatic stage of a theatrical breakup, our 27th story proves that in the digital age, even our virtual worlds aren't safe from real-world heartache. This is the account of the custom video game level, a meticulously coded farewell that transformed a shared hobby into a gauntlet of emotional puzzles, with the final boss being the truth itself. The programmer of this interactive heartbreak was a software engineer named Leo, who had been in a relationship with his girlfriend Maya for nearly 4 years. Their bond was cemented in a shared love of classic platformer games, and they had spent countless hours side by side on the couch, navigating intricate levels together in games like Celeste and Super Meat Boy. For Leo, ending this relationship required a language they both understood, the language of challenge, precision, and pixel-perfect execution. He decided he wouldn't just tell Maya it was over, he would make her earn the revelation by playing through it. The platform he chose was the incredibly versatile Super Mario Maker 2, a game that allows players to design and share their own custom levels. Leo spent over a month secretly crafting his masterpiece of misery, a level he titled, with a touch of ominous ambiguity, The Final Castle. The design was a work of diabolical genius, a cruel love letter to their entire relationship. The early sections were filled with nostalgic Easter eggs and references to their favorite games, requiring precise jumps and cooperative mechanics that mirrored how they had once worked so well together. The music blocks played the melody from their first date, and the enemies were chosen based on inside jokes. But as the level progressed, the difficulty spiked dramatically and the tone began to shift. The pathways became convoluted and filled with traps that felt cheap and unavoidable, a metaphor for the communication breakdowns they had experienced. There were sections where the only way forward was to sacrifice a helpful companion character, and puzzles that required backtracking through previous, now dangerous areas, a clear nod to rehashing old arguments. Leo was essentially gamifying their dysfunction, forcing Maya to physically navigate the very frustrations that had doomed their partnership. After nearly an hour of grueling gameplay, facing countless brutal deaths and restarts, Maya finally reached the level's end. Instead of the standard flagpole or gold tape, she arrived at a vast, empty chamber. In the center of the screen was a single, large question block. With a sense of exhausted triumph, she jumped and hit it from below. Instead of a power-up, the block produced a large, scrolling text box that filled the screen, the kind usually reserved for a princess's plea for help. The message began warmly, "Congratulations, you've made it through all the challenges." Maya's heart likely swelled with pride, thinking this was Leo's weird but sweet way of celebrating her skills. The next line delivered the gut punch. The text continued, "Which is more than I can say for our relationship. I'm sorry, Maya. This is the final level for us." "It's over." The screen then faded to black and the words "Game Over" appeared, not in the game's standard font, but in a custom, stark, blood-red text that Leo had painstakingly created pixel by pixel. The controller vibrated gently in her hands one last time, a final mechanical sigh before the silence set in. The psychological impact was profound and multi-layered. She hadn't just been broken up with, she had been forced to invest focus, skill, and emotional energy into reaching that rejection. The entire experience, the struggle, the brief triumph of completion, the horrifying reveal, was now permanently baked into a save file on their Nintendo Switch. She couldn't even avoid the memory by not playing the game. The level was right there on their console, a permanent, playable monument to their failure. Leo had used the one thing they cherished together to deliver the message that it was all ending, ensuring that the joy of gaming would now forever be bittersweet, and every future victory would feel just a little bit hollow. After navigating pixelated heartbreak and theatrical betrayal, we arrive at a story that treats love not as a feeling, but as a flawed consumer product in need of a formal withdrawal from the market. This is the bizarrely bureaucratic tale of the fake product recall, a breakup that weaponized corporate jargon and official-looking paperwork to deliver a message of romantic obsolescence. Our story centers on a man named David, a quality assurance manager whose entire professional life was dedicated to finding defects and issuing corrective actions. When he decided his relationship with his girlfriend, Anna, was beyond repair, he didn't just see a failing partnership, he saw a non-conforming product that required an official recall. David's plan was a masterpiece of professional appropriation. He spent an entire weekend meticulously crafting a document that looked and felt exactly like the high-stakes recall notices he handled at work. He used his company's specialized design software to create a convincing letterhead for a fictional entity he called the Relationship Standards Bureau. The notice was dense with intimidating legalistic language and faux regulatory codes. The subject line was chilling in its clinical precision. Urgent safety recall notice for one unit of David and Anna's relationship model year 2021. The document cited a litany of critical failures and non-compliant components, framing their personal issues as if they were faulty wiring in a toaster. It listed reasons for the recall that were both brutally honest and absurdly formal. Emotional connection failure due to faulty empathy circuitry, hazardous communication malfunction presenting risk of emotional injury, and defective long-term planning module prone to catastrophic failure under stress. But the true stroke of genius and cruelty was in the instructions for the consumer. The notice informed Anna that the product was deemed unfit for purpose and unsafe for continued operation. It provided a detailed, multi-step process for its safe return and decommissioning. She was instructed to package all associated memories and shared possessions in a secure container, fill out an included relationship discontinuation form in duplicate, and await collection by a certified emotional disposal agent, which of course would never arrive. The notice even included a fake toll-free number for a customer heartache hotline that, when called, played a pre-recorded message of a somber-sounding woman saying, "We are sorry for your loss. Your call is important to us. Please continue to hold before disconnecting." It was a complete closed loop of corporate-style rejection, designed to eliminate any possibility of a personal response. For Anna, receiving this document in her mailbox was a surreal experience. The envelope looked so official that she initially thought it was something from her bank or the government. The moment she unfolded the letter and began to read, the bizarre collision of the deeply personal and the chillingly impersonal created a unique form of whiplash. Her own private heartache had been reframed as a quality control issue, her flaws and his grievances weren't just his opinions, they were now presented as objective, documented facts from a faceless bureau. The sheer effort involved in creating the notice, the design, the specific jargon, the fake hotline made the rejection feel even more calculated and absolute. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was a premeditated corporate strategy executed on their love life. David had succeeded in doing what he set out to do. He ended the relationship without ever having to face her, outsourcing the emotional labor to a piece of paper that treated their years together as nothing more than a defective unit in need of processing. If you thought a fake product recall notice was the ultimate in detached, bureaucratic breakups, our final story proves that some farewells are designed not for immediate impact, but for a slow burn of anticipation that stretches years into the future. This is the chronicle of the time capsule termination, a farewell so patient and forward-thinking it treated the end of a relationship not as a conclusion, but as a cliffhanger with a built-in, years-long delay. Our story centers on a couple named Grace and Ethan, whose relationship ended not with a bang but with a burial. The mastermind was Grace, a historian with a profound respect for artifacts and the stories they tell. After a 5-year relationship, she concluded that a simple breakup conversation would be insufficient to capture the weight and complexity of what they were ending. She proposed an idea to Ethan that he initially found romantic and deeply profound. They would create a time capsule together, a sealed container holding the physical evidence of their love, to be buried in a significant location and opened on the 10th anniversary of their first date. Ethan, touched by the gesture, agreed, completely unaware that Grace's true intention was not to preserve their love but to inter it. The entire creation process was, in her mind, a funeral for their future. The burial ceremony itself was a surreal parody of a romantic outing. They drove to their favorite hiking spot at sunset, a place where they had often picnicked, carrying a small, sturdy, waterproof lockbox. With a solemnity that Ethan mistook for sweet nostalgia, Grace directed them to dig a hole at the base of a specific gnarled oak tree. She had even brought a bottle of wine to share once the box was in the ground, toasting to what was and what will be remembered. As they patted the last bit of earth into place, marking the spot with a single, unassuming river stone, Ethan felt a sense of beautiful closure. Grace felt the satisfaction of a perfectly laid trap. For in that box, nestled among cherished mementos like ticket stubs, a dried flower from their first anniversary, and a mixed CD of their songs, was her true masterpiece, a sealed, handwritten letter addressed to Ethan, to be read a decade in the future. The letter was the heart of the time capsule, a meticulously crafted piece of emotional time travel. In it, she didn't just say it was over. She detailed, with the chilling clarity of hindsight, all the reasons their relationship was doomed to fail. She predicted the paths their lives would take without each other. She pointed out the flaws he hadn't yet recognized in himself, and she coldly dissected every promise he had made that she knew he would never keep. The letter's closing lines were a masterstroke of cruel finality. By the time you read this, you'll have lived 10 years of the life we were supposed to have together. I hope you understand now why we couldn't. I knew it then, Grace. The true psychological genius of her plan was the agonizing, years-long wait it imposed. Grace didn't have to be present for the drama of the immediate breakup. She simply ended things cordially a week after the burial, leaving Ethan bewildered but assuming it was just a rough patch. He spent the subsequent months and years wondering what had gone wrong, perhaps even holding onto a sliver of hope that their connection was merely on pause, waiting to be rediscovered when that capsule was unearthed. He was living his life under the shadow of a delayed verdict, a sword of Damocles hanging by a very long, very slow-burning fuse. Grace, meanwhile, had moved on completely unburdened. She had delivered her breakup speech, but she wouldn't have to witness his reaction for a full 10 years. She had effectively mailed her heartache into the future, ensuring that a piece of their past would one day resurface to haunt him long after she had stopped caring. It was a breakup that demonstrated a terrifying truth. The most cutting goodbyes aren't always the ones you hear immediately. Sometimes they're waiting for you, buried in the dirt, ticking quietly toward a detonation date years down the road. And so, we've journeyed through a gallery of goodbyes that truly defy belief, from the sky-high breakup written in vanishing smoke to the gut punch of a personalized pizza message. We've seen heartache delivered by parrot, etched into crossword puzzles, and even buried in a time capsule for a future self to discover. These 29 stories are more than just bizarre anecdotes. They are a testament to the incredible and sometimes frightening lengths the human mind will go to avoid a simple, honest conversation. What drives a person to stage an entire flash mob, or to code a custom video game level, or to place a breakup notice in the newspaper's classifieds? It often boils down to a potent cocktail of fear, a desire for control, and a deep-seated need for the last word. A face-to-face breakup is messy, unpredictable, and emotionally taxing. It requires vulnerability and the courage to witness the immediate pain you're causing. These elaborate methods offer a perceived escape from that discomfort. They allow the initiator to script the entire narrative, control the timing, and often to avoid being present for the fallout. It's a way to deliver a message of rejection while simultaneously insulating oneself from the emotional consequences, transforming a shared experience into a one-sided performance. Yet within the absurdity, there's a strange kind of vulnerability on display too. The person who spends weeks crafting a museum exhibit or a custom comic book is, in their own convoluted way, screaming that this relationship mattered enough to warrant a spectacular, unforgettable ending. It's the opposite of ghosting. It's an ending so loud and so specific that it can never be forgotten or misunderstood. While the methods are often cruel and cowardly, they are rarely born from apathy. They are the product of overwhelming emotion, be it anger, hurt, or a profound inability to cope channeled into a creative, if misguided, final act. These stories remind us that there is no perfect way to end a relationship. A simple, kind conversation will always be the braver and more respectful choice. But they also show us the incredible power of narrative. We are all the authors of our own lives, and sometimes when a central chapter comes to a close, the urge to give it a dramatic, memorable finale is simply too powerful to resist. These individuals chose to end their stories not with a period, but with an exclamation point, a splash of color, or a plot twist so shocking it would leave their audience, our audience of one, stunned into silence. Now we turn the microphone over to you. We've shared 29 of the weirdest American breakup stories we could find, but we know there are countless more out there. Have you ever been broken up with in a way that was so strange, so creative, or so utterly bewildering that you still can't quite believe it happened? Or perhaps you've heard a legendary tale from a friend. We want to hear all about it. Share your stories in the comments below. Let's build the ultimate archive of bizarre breakups together. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the strange and unexpected, make sure you don't miss out on our next exploration. We're constantly unearthing the most fascinating, unbelievable, and downright bizarre facts about America, from hidden histories to modern mysteries that will make you see this country in a whole new light. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and remember, no matter how your last relationship ended, at least they didn't hire a skywriter.